All right. Welcome, everybody, to episode 233 of the Millennial Sales Podcast. Your host, Tommy Tahoe Alemo, and this is the show where we help young salespeople get to the next level, build the skill set, make more money, get promoted, find the right job, whatever it is that you need. That's what we're here for. And I'm on the path right there with you. Really stoked about today's episode. We're going to get to the guest in a minute. Before we do that, let's do a quick shout out to our sponsors. First, want to give a shout out to gong.io. You might have saw the news last week, 250 million with an M in funding for our Series E. I work there. That's how much I love the company and the product. It is simply the best sales invention that's ever existed. I mean, that is not an exaggeration. It changes my life. It has helped thousands and thousands of companies. So check us out. Revenue Intelligence. You've likely heard of it. You've likely used it or something similar. So check us out at gong.io or just DM me on LinkedIn and I'll point you in the right direction for who to talk to. The other sponsor we want to shout out is postal.io, who's helping to really customize the gift giving experience to customers. So you can do it from the brewery across town, the local florist, to customers, to partners, to prospects. So instead of like giving your kind of lame, like standard gift, you can really personalize it and rock people's socks. I use it with customers. I use it with podcast guests. I highly recommend that you check them out. They're doing something cool that ends this month, that anyone that goes to the Apple podcast and gives a review, which should only take a minute of this podcast, and sends that to me, we'll give you a free Starbucks gift card. So I've got a Starbucks here right now. Go figure, Pike Place for me, but you can get whatever you want there with the gift card. And, it helps me, it helps them, it helps you. It's a win-win-win, as Michael Scott would say. So check them out at postal.io. Much love to both of those sponsors. Let's get into today's content. I've got Stephanie Jenkins. Let's just do a quick background on Stephanie, because this is episode 233, and she's one of the most impressive people that I think I've had on this show. She is currently the CRO at Flowhub, which in its own right is interesting in the cannabis technology landscape. But she graduated from Cornell with 3 degrees, chemistry, biology, and art history, and then decided to just move to California with no job, get into sales. She cut her teeth for a few years and then got into Glassdoor. And from 8 years and 4 promotions later, she was the VP of sales there. And then, about 9 months after that, into her start at Flowhub, she got named CRO. So we're talking a decade-ish of sales experience and already a CRO of a high-growth company in a crazy, exciting market. She's really impressive. We talk about her journey. We talk about being mission-focused and how important that is to your sales career. That's why I think this episode's so important to anyone that's in sales or leadership. You have to find that mission that helps you keep going. And, mine personally is I get so much satisfaction out of helping other salespeople. I think sales can change your life. It's changed mine. And so that's why I do this podcast. That's why I do the blog. That's why I work at Gong. It all works together. And we also talk about the cannabis tech world and what she's doing with Flowhub and a bunch of other stuff. But I think you're going to love this episode. I'll shut up now. Let's go straight to my conversation with Stephanie Jenkins. Let's go. All right, Stephanie Jenkins, welcome to the Millennial Sales Podcast. How are you?
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. When Mark Cosaglow tells me that I need to interview someone and meet someone, hands down, no questions asked, I send the email and I get it set up. So I'm excited to be talking with you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate, following in Mark's footsteps here. It's one of the greats.
Yeah, he's a legend. You were speaking at the Unleash conference a few weeks ago. Is that?
Yeah. We had a little sales, like an American Idol contest where we had to put CROs and sales leaders, myself as one of them, in the hot seat to perform some sales skills. And Mark, no surprise, won the American Idol contest. But there'll be another one for me another time. So
you can only aspire to be as creative and, like on your toes as Mark. So yes, I'm sure that was a blast.
It was really fun. It was super fun.
So I want to start with the beginning of your sales career because I'm always fascinated about how people get into sales. And I go in your LinkedIn, I see Cornell, I'm like, okay. And I see biology, chemistry, art, history. Uh, and
Yeah.
so,
Uh-huh.
like 15 years later, you're a CRO, in
Yeah.
tech. And so like, what was that all about? Like when you're graduating Cornell,
Okay.
like, why did you get into sales?
I had no idea that I would have ended up in sales. I really didn't. I think a lot of people in college don't really understand that sales is a career, and it's a really awesome one too. And I don't think that they really understand that it's a really great path to go into after you graduate. But at Cornell, I triple majored in chemistry, biology, and art history. I got my
Triple major.
concentration, triple major. I got my concentration in biochemistry, my honors in chemistry, and I won an award for the best honors thesis at the college,
Jesus.
the university too. So I like to say that knew I was smart and knew how to work really hard, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. I really didn't. And I thought maybe I'd go into like research, and I tried, research, and maybe I'd go down to academia, and I really didn't like it, like being under a fume hood all day. I'm generally energized by other people, so that wasn't working very well. And I thought maybe I'd be a doctor, and I didn't really want to be a doctor. Kind of blood and guts still makes me a little squeamish, so maybe that's not the best path for me either. So I kind of moved to San Francisco with this dream of the great West and of Silicon Valley, and all the entrepreneurs out here are so inspiring, and all the technology is so inspiring. And I had like $2,000 in my bank account, and I was driving down a nearly broken down Honda Civic, and I didn't have a job when I first moved to San Francisco, so I just rolled right up and needed to find one really quickly. And I found a job in sales, and they offered to pay me the most money. So I thought, why not? I'd never considered the path before. And that's how I found it. But as soon as I found it, I knew like this is what I want to do. This is like an awesome job. It's competitive. It's fun. You get to help people buy the products that you're selling, and you get to kind of evangelize what you believe in. And it's kind of rewarding to hit and achieve your goals. And the play on communication is so interesting too, that I thought, like, why didn't anyone tell me about this in college? This is way better than chemistry. So that's kind of how it evolved.
So, okay, I've got a few questions. So you went to Cornell. Are you from New York or like the New England Northeast area?
No, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, just outside
Okay.
of it in the suburb.
Okay. Um, and so you graduate, and I have to imagine your parents or your guidance counselor or someone was like, you're going to give
What
up
are you gonna do?
this triple major and just like go out to San Francisco. It just feels like
Yeah.
I can't even imagine, just doing that.
Oh, no, people do that every day. Yeah, I mean, yeah, probably at some point you did that too with, like following your dreams and your passions. No one tells you what to do when you exit college. People
Yeah.
give you options and choices. People say like, oh, you could go into like, you can go to academia, you can go into industry, you can, go into, I thought maybe I'd go into biotech when I moved out to San Francisco. That was kind of like, I wanted to go work for Genentech and,
Yeah.
live in the Bay Area and do all the cool biotech stuff. That's what I thought I might do out here. But there's no one gives you the playbook to go do. So you kind of follow your own path, and sometimes you land on something that you realize is a strength of yours, and you pursue it, and it ends up being the right decision.
Did you pick it up relatively quickly? Like, did you have pretty immediate success?
I would say so. Like in my first sales role, it was at a company called Capital Asset Exchange and Trading, CAE. I think someone else on your podcast recently also went to the CAE, kind of post-university experience, who I knew very well, Patricia
Yep.
Duchesne.
Yep.
Shout out if she listens.
Shout out to her.
But they did, I think, a great job with hiring people who had a ton of ambition and passion, and could work hard and smart. And honestly, like the company's training program was like throw you in the fire and let's sink or swim. I don't know if I would advise this for most sales training programs now, but it's certainly a good way to kind of see what types of personalities or traits or skills work in an organization in sales. And like I knew right away that I really liked it. Like I really enjoyed having conversations with people every day. I really enjoyed closing and negotiating deals, especially kind of the negotiation part and like the psychological aspect of it.
Yep.
And I enjoyed kind of like the hustle and the grit and the grind of it very much. And I, there was a quick ramp, and if you swam, you swam, and you kept on going. So yeah.
You were probably used to that grind from college too, like that must have been a ton of work, right?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. It's something that's always been, I think, part of my life, where you kind of fill it with a lot of things to do or things to learn. And I don't know if I considered university a grind, because I think I really enjoyed what I was learning. And I've never really thought of my role in sales or any sales job that I've had as necessarily a grind, because it's kind of a mindset. Like if you're enjoying it, you just keep going. It's why you're doing this podcast, right, Tom? Like you
Right.
really enjoy it and you find interest and passion in it. So yeah.
Absolutely. So after a year or two, I think you then landed at Glassdoor, which is where you really kind of built the majority of your career to date. What led you to Glassdoor? Do you remember?
Yeah. Oh, for me, it was all about the mission. When working at CAE, it was a lot of travel and a lot of really long hours. And I don't think I felt myself very connected with the mission at one point there. I think I had kind of convinced myself for the first few years that we were doing the right thing. And then I remember like running on a treadmill in Singapore thinking like, what am I doing? Like, I don't know if I'm like bettering the world right now by doing this job. I don't know if like what I'm selling is making a difference, or if I'm kind of the middleman in this. And it led to like a disheartening perspective of what I was doing. And it made me kind of snap up and wake up like, is this really how I want to spend my life? Or is there something more that I could be working towards, or a bigger picture or mission? So I remember then researching different organizations. I found Glassdoor when we were really early. I don't think it was a common name or a household name at that point, or that even many people like knew the platform existed. But to me, it was so important because you're bringing so much transparency to people, and you're kind of shedding the light into a lot of the dark corners of employment, and you're helping employers at the same time. So when you're selling the products, you're really helping bring the best fit people into their organization that fit their organization.
Yeah.
Some companies are awesome and they offer free benefits and perks and they have a very specific culture. And some companies are like an interesting, different type of roller coaster, or maybe not that rewarding, but it's better that those things going into a job, so your expectations stay similar. So I found that company in the sale really rewarding from that perspective. And I met our CEO at the time, and really felt that they were empowering like a much better future for a place where we spend so many of our working hours, that I really wanted to hop on board.
Yeah. And you mentioned, earlier about being passionate about like being a part of a mission driven organization. And
Yeah.
I feel like that probably ties pretty clearly to what you said a few minutes ago about it not being a grind, when you kind of feel like there's the mission behind it, right? If you enjoy it, and you feel like you're helping people, and, in the scenario of Glassdoor, you can kind of like paint the picture that, okay, I'm helping, someone out there find the right job for them. And I'm helping that company out there find the right employee, versus something that's usually can be kind of a painful process. So did that help you like push harder and like, work
100%.
smarter and connect with customers more?
100%, because like our mission was to help people find the job that they love. This is not just a job, right? This is not just like your 9 to 5 that you put, maybe that is your dream because you have passions outside. But if you're spending so much of your time there, the top 3 things in your life are like your family, where you work and where you live. Those are the
Yeah.
top. That's it. Those are kind of your someone's core values, right? Where you work is a huge component of that. It's where you're spending time. It can be like a source of great stress. It can be a source of great enjoyment. And it's good knowing, like, very transparently what it's like at that organization, the good, the bad, the ugly, before you go into it. So I felt like what we were doing was a much bigger and more important than, even what we were selling, or, the one-on-one conversations that I was having with customers, or having with reps or employees or anything like that, because there's this bigger picture that we were working towards. So yeah, I've always felt that way about, you really have to believe in what you're doing.
Did you, in the early days of your career, I'm curious, were you someone that like read sales books or listened to tapes or anything like that? Like, or was it more like you learned on the go, like from experience and from maybe mentors and things like that? But I'm just curious, as someone that was, in a former life, very studious and very good with books, I imagine, I'm curious if you leverage those to help in your early days.
You know what? I really didn't start leveraging those until I got to Glassdoor. So the early days of CAE, it was very like fly by the seat of your pants, just grind and hustle. And it was a very like negotiation driven sale. So it was all about like, almost call it like 75% of the role was like negotiating back and forth. So a little bit different. And I didn't really find a lot of like the sales books until later, and how valuable they were. And then, I think I had one of my former managers, Chris Kurtz, like shout out to him, has inspired a lifelong love of like sales learning for me. Gave me a whole reading list and a bunch of just great books that not just helped me learn the sales process a lot better, but also kind of motivation. How do you how do you motivate yourself? How do you motivate others? The greater like why that we're doing this, like all kinds of inspirational, non-fictional reading. And I really didn't start getting into that kind of lifelong love of learning of the craft until the Glassdoor days. In the early days, it was just like, just grit.
Yeah.
And no skill. I remember, I remember going to Glassdoor. This is a true story. And I did a call with, this was so embarrassing. It was my worst phone call I've ever had. And it was a manager. I had a manager at the time who told me, like, you got to do discovery. And I didn't really know what discovery was at the time. I was like, wait, what's discovery? They're like, oh, you're supposed to like ask a bunch of questions, so you can like kind of learn about your prospect, and then you can like use those learnings later in the sales call. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll try that. And I had just landed this like big call with the Marriott, and I had emailed their CEO. I forgot, it's the same guy. And they had passed it on to the buyer, and I was getting like a C-suite person in the room with me. I was going to try this brand new discovery process, which I stupidly just learned about. And God. I remember I had written out my questions before, and I start like running down, like, tell me about like, what are some of your projects this year? Like, what are some of your like values? And the buyer just flat out stopped me in the middle of the conversation and said, wait, why are you asking me so many questions? And I was like, I'm just learning about your business so that I can like position products differently later.
Oh God.
It was the worst call ever. Then from that moment, which was not that far into the call, I'd asked like one question or two questions. They were like, just show me the product.
Oh,
and
you're
I was
dead
like,
in the water.
I'm like, oh my God, here we go. And I think I half started going into a demo, and then they steamrolled me again on something else, and we ended the call like 15 minutes. And it was probably the worst sales call I ever had after I attempted to do this new thing that I found, which is discovery, right? How embarrassing is that?
And then you probably saw Marriott as a featured customer on your competitor's website 2 months later.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure I did. Yeah. Like, how could I have bungled that sales process? But then like a lot of what I learned, and I'll attribute a lot of this to Chris, was like, what's like sales foundational, like, let's get faster. Let's get realer. Let's not play. That's on Kahala. What's his name? Yes. No. Basically like you're giving me an odd look, Tom.
I don't know what you're, I don't even know what we're talking about right
I
now.
don't know.
Let's get
A
real
lot
or
of like
let's not play. I like that line.
yeah, it's a really great book that gives Masan Kahala, I think is the name of the author, that gives the foundational of like a discovery-led sales process. Like
Mm.
so I've had to go back and kind of relearn at that point a lot of traditional sales, and I really have enjoyed being a student of the industry after that.
Yeah, I love that. Were there any books, and it could be sales or it could be like some of the mindset,
Mm-hmm.
psychology, any motivation, anything like that, that really stood out and made a huge impact on you, or anything that you recommend that other people read, like on your team or people you mentor, anything like that?
Yeah, one of my favorite motivational type of books, and this is a leadership book in general. So anyone who's like who wants to become a sales leader someday, I feel like should absolutely read this, which is Gung Ho. Ken Blanchard. Ken Blanchard, wrote like
Mm.
1 Minute Manager, Who Stole My Cheese, like those kind of
Mm-hmm.
silly looking. They have like
Yeah.
very 1980s covers on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, he wrote a quick one called Gung Ho, and it kind of goes through the core of how to motivate teams. And it just describes like a really wonderful philosophy of having like a very mission driven organization. Like I'm going to give you the highlights of this book real quick. There's kind of like
Yeah.
3 foundational elements of it: the secret of the squirrel, the way of the beaver, and the gift of the goose. And the secret of the squirrel is kind of like your core philosophy, like why are you here? And you have to help everyone find that why and find that mission and help tie their jobs to a much bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized when you adopt that philosophy in managing teams, it's really powerful. Like, you know, having seen what you're doing and helping that be like helping that tie that to a much bigger impact can be like an incredible powerful force for and a very powerful motivational force for an individual contributor and anyone in an organization, not just sales, to be able to see, what I'm doing, what I'm selling makes a really big difference in this world. And it's
Yeah.
not just, it's not just me selling a product. Like I'm actually helping change and move society along. And then the second foundational philosophy there is the way of the beaver, which is it's I'm trying to find ways to describe this. It's like, so a group of beavers when they build a dam, there's
Yep.
not like a beaver in the corner that's like telling all the other beavers instructions on how to build the dam and like organizing their work and managing their work. There's not a leader beaver.
Right.
It's this concept of like matrix style leadership. So creating a safe enough space where the best ideas can come out and
Mm-hmm.
the best idea wins. And how do you help operationalize this, kind of this way of the beaver where there isn't a leader, and you're letting the team lead itself by helping encourage organizational change or project change or management and letting those ideas surface. And then the last one is gift of the goose, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's cheering each other on. So using positivity and good intent
Yeah.
and gratitude to help further an organization and motivate people, which I've always found lovely.
I love that. I've never heard of that book before.
It's a really good one. I think I just gave you all the cliff notes though, so check it out.
Ken Blanchard should be paying you royalties for your like 2-minute rundown of his books.
He should. Yeah. So I've given away all the spoilers though. It kind of like it's like a mystery. You're like, oh, what's the next secret? But I've just told you all of them. So good
So
luck
now
with reading
people
the book.
they don't need to go read the book. They can just take your 2-minute version and go use it for their leadership.
There you go. That's it.
So, so I know one thing that you were, you mentioned that you were passionate about is like, as you became a leader, like helping others with their career progression and kind of like the
Yeah.
mapping of that. I'd love to hear you talk about how you've done that, at Glassdoor, maybe how you're doing that at Flowhub, if it's different between the two places.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think that a lot of people in sales, like when they join sales, it's often because they, maybe they're energized by talking to other people. Maybe they're competitive in some ways and numbers motivate them. And I think when you join a sales organization or step into it, maybe as an SDR, a lot of companies, especially when they're smaller, don't have like really great ways to move through an organization. Like, if I'm good at my job, like, how do I progress to that next level?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've perceived talking to a lot of people at different companies, like this is pretty common where people feel like they get stuck. Like there isn't that clear path up, or they have to wait for someone to leave, and that even then they don't know if they'll be able to get the promotion.
I've been
Or
there.
right. I think a lot of people have. And I've always found it to be like rather like a shame that organizations don't help try to systematically correct for that, or like reward people in a non-biased way who are high performing in sales organizations. Another interesting thing that I hear a lot too is that, like, oh, well, why did they get the promotion? My numbers are better than their numbers. That's not fair. Like, I hit my quota all 4 quarters and they missed it twice, right?
Yeah.
So how do you solve for that kind of like unbiased promotion pathway? So something that we started doing at Glassdoor, which I thought was really awesome, and I've been able to carry through to Flowhub, was to create career ladders and career progressions to provide in-role promotions, and then like really objective criteria on how do you get to that next level, and how do you get to a place where you're interviewing for it, and then what is the interview process, the evaluation process. So for example, if you step into an SDR role, you start at, call it, I'm just going to make up some numbers. Let's call it like 50, you're making 50K a year, right?
Yep.
If you're 6 months successful in the role, hit quota 4 out of the 6 months, you bump up to the next level. So SDR level 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get a 10% base bump. You've now gotten like a little promotion. So it's like very quick, 6 months in the role, you've hit your quota, another 4 out of 6 months. Great. You get an automatic promotion to the next tier, a little 10% base bump. So you get these little tiny promotions, stair-step promotions within role that actually feel really good and rewarding. And they reinforce, like, I am doing a great job at my job. I am doing a really good one. And sometimes they come with like you can create it where they come with little title changes, or like little rewards, or increases of scope or responsibility. And you can create them between roles as well. So, going from SDR to an AE, or an AE to an SAE. And if you outline very clear pathways to get there, there's actually like a great way to do organizational design that allow for great like career progression and passing through these career ladders where you don't find yourself really stuck. So I think a lot of sales organizations in general, they're starting out, they're doing things so fast that, oh, we just got to get some AEs here, and they kind of forget about like, well, what happens next? What happens after 2 years and they're still in the same role? Like, where do we go from here? So there's an element of, you kind of have to think ahead a few steps with, how do I create like a very clear ladder and structure? How do I communicate how do I communicate the process of progression? And then when you can see like, oh, then that next step is only like 3 months away or 4 months away, it creates like a really great retention system for a company and organization. And it's really painful to lose people in sales, especially high performers. So it's a great way to kind of continue to help them continue to progress their career up into the right. So it's something that I've been really passionate about, because there's, it's so cool to see someone come in and learn a skill or a trait, and then to see them be able to grow their career and kind of stay with the organization as it's grown. So
that's awesome. And are all of these like binary, like quantifiable? You hit your quarter, or you hit your month 4 out of 6. Is there anything that's like more subjective, like you've been a leader on the team, or something that is kind of like, maybe a little tougher to judge?
Yeah. So you can, well, first of all, organizations can set this up a variety of ways. So that's kind of up to you, right? I'll just start out with that statement. But when we did it at Glassdoor, we had when we created in-role promotions, we had not like binary only for in-role promotion. So if you're going from, call it AE1 to AE2 to AE3, these kind of 6-month 10% pay bump, base pay bumps, it was like all on metrics only, right? So the way we had defined it for AE roles was, okay, once you sell a certain amount, great, you go to the next level. It could take you 4 months. it could take you 8 months. But once you hit that threshold, you moved. For different roles, we did it a little differently too. So people in our growth team, for example, we would do like a percentage of months hitting their quota, hitting and exceeding their quota, and then we'd move them to the next level. So for me, for in-role promotions, it felt really important for us to do something that's not political in any way, or could be perceived as biased in any way. It just is like straight numbers. But then for promotions between roles, so if you're jumping a ladder, if you're moving from AE to SA or an S&B rep to an enterprise rep or whatever it is, we would do and communicate. We would do here's what you need to qualify to interview for a promotion. So and publish it. We published it in a really a very open place where everyone could see your view. And then once you got to interview for that promotion, we would publish like the scorecard of kind of how we are judging people on this. And with those type of progressions, those large bumps, we would do qualitative and quantitative, of course, too. So there would be elements of, are they a team player, or, probably not for a lot of IC roles, but like, for example, I don't know, like, how do you feel like their learning agility or their ability to grasp strategy or their ability to talk to a larger customer base or a different type of customer might be, those types of kind of qualitative things as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you joined Flowhub, what, like 11 months ago?
Oh, yeah, I think even less than that. September 2019. What is that?
Oh,
how many months
okay.
do we have? 9?
Yeah, 8 or 9.
8, 9? 9. Yeah, September of 2020. So yeah. 9 months. 9 months.
That's crazy. Did you, I just have to say, I just have to put it out on the table. That's really freaking impressive. Like after like a 10 years or so ish in sales,
pretty close
to be at a CRO at like a high growth company. That's pretty crazy.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Tom. I do appreciate that. It's never been my intent to like, I didn't walk out of college saying I want to be a CRO at a fast growing tech company. To me, this goes back to like, it's always felt like I've wanted to create organizational efficiency. I've wanted to help with strategy. I've always felt like I've got these ideas. I want to share them. I want to help us improve as a company. So I felt like a very natural progression, but I do really appreciate that. It does make me feel good. So thank you.
I was going to say, like, when you don't have to even answer this question, but when you got the job, you must have been like, hell yeah. Like that must feel good after after a decade. There's people that, are directors or VPs of sales after like 25 years. And in 10, you got to the C-suite of a great fast growing company. So I'm just very impressed by it. You don't even have to answer.
But yeah, I don't know. I've always wanted to be like a CEO of a company. I don't know why. I've always thought like maybe I've got good enough ideas to be out there. It comes from that like entrepreneurial spirit of this great West, right? The Silicon Valley that we're in, of like, well, if Zuckerberg can do it, I can do it too. But I've never. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I mean, you get CEOs at a lot of companies who are fresh out of college too, and they go on to do great things. So
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you came into a pretty like, what's the right word? Kind of like a controversial industry. Would you call it that? Would you call cannabis technology like controversial?
I would say like cannabis, there's still certainly a stigma around it in the US, and more so depending on kind of who and where you're talking with, right? Like if I go to Georgia right now and start, talking about cannabis, I might get some funny looks. But here in California, the stigma is certainly starting to go away. And it's becoming a lot more, I think, normal and accepted. But there are, it's only legalized in 35 states, but that's med and rec combined. Rec is only legal in 15 now that New York and New Mexico have passed. So it's still, a controversial industry. It's not legal in all states in the US. I'd say that's an accurate statement.
Yeah. So what made you want to get into that industry of anyone that you could have chosen?
Yeah, Okay, so two things. The first thing is that like I mentioned before, I consider myself an entrepreneur. I may have never started my own company, but I'd like to say that I approach,
Yeah.
life with that sort of mindset. Um, and I thought, wow, there's really not another opportunity that you ever get to work in an industry that is growing like a weed, no pun intended. Um,
You use that. You use that joke every week.
It's true. I do. But there's not an industry that you get to work in that's growing at such exponential rate. And you don't get to work in an industry that's brand new ever again. Like, what other industry has come online in the last 25 years that's kind of popped up out of nowhere? The internet, that was the
Yeah.
last one. That went pretty well. Let's see how this one goes.
The internet's still kicking.
It's still kicking. So that really intrigued me because I I I think that there's like a huge opportunity to bring a lot of kind of structure and thought leadership into the space too. That maybe um, because there's still not that many players in it, could be very interesting. The second reason kind of goes back to the mission too of like our mission at Flowhub is to provide safe access for every adult on planet Earth, safe access to recreational or medical cannabis products. We don't actually sell the products. We actually sell the technology that helps sell the products, just to clarify.
Yeah.
But we still believe that that's very important. And even though that there's a big stigma around it, it's pretty amazing the stories that you hear in this industry on how it's really changed people's lives. So from a medical perspective, I mean, there are so many use cases that are incredible that a plant can solve for pain management. The stories that you hear too are like, my grandma has Parkinson's and she's up in, Wisconsin. This is a story, right? This isn't my personal story. And it's the only thing that's been able to kind of help her live a normal life, or cancer management, or epilepsy, or seizures, or pain, arthritis, Alzheimer's. Like, there are so many really valid and compelling medical applications. And when you hear these stories of people, it's very compelling that, wow, this is just like a very misunderstood plant with a lot of very applicable medical benefits. And then from a recreational perspective, I think it's a much safer product too. I think about like my two little sons. They're 6 and 4. They're little. They don't even know what alcohol is. They don't even know what cannabis is.
Yeah.
I haven't explained it to them yet. I'm sure that time will come.
Give them a few years.
Give them a few years. But I think about them when they grow up to be, like 16, 18, 21, in that age where they're, experimenting. And I think, would I rather drive one of them to the hospital because they have imbibed too much alcohol and now are, have alcohol poisoning or thrown up everywhere? Or would I rather have them giggling in the basement, eating Taco Bell and watching Dumb and Dumber? And I think the choice for me as a parent is really clear, which one I would rather see. And, I think everyone kind of deserves that access, the access to the product and to the plant. And I think it's a very misunderstood plant right now too. Like, it's still difficult to bring up to like your neighbor. It's not like you go over to your neighbor's house and you're like, hey, do you want a beer or something like that? You walk in and they offer you a beer. You don't ever talk about like, do you want an edible or anything like that? There's a stigma around it.
Totally.
So I didn't even realize this, but I wore my Flowhub t-shirt, which has a giant cannabis leaf on it, to a PTA meeting the other day. And and I got a couple looks, but then I got a couple moms coming up to me afterwards, and we were chit-chatting. And I think once you break down that door, the stigma starts to go away. But the fact that I even questioned, if I'm wearing my Flowhub t-shirt to a PTA meeting versus if I worked for like Lagunitas, right, there's be no problem. But there's still like a stigma around it that's starting to go away. And I'd like to think that that's kind of part of the larger mission, is how do we create a world where maybe you don't think about what shirt you're wearing when you go out, or maybe we get to a point where we can talk about it more openly with our friends and neighbors. So That's it. And it's kind of cool to see because even in the 9 months that I've been in this industry, I can actually see a little bit of positive momentum across the country and in conversations when, when you're talking about cannabis or you're talking about, cannabis tech or anything like that, how it's progressing.
Yeah. And like, I have to imagine that part of the reason for the stigma, this is just me pontificating, has to be like maybe up to like the government level, and like there's ties to
Yeah.
the alcohol industry or the tobacco industry. And so like they don't want another player. I've always thought like there should be, or there could be in a world where, instead of like a bar, that there's like there's like a hookah lounge. That's a thing. You could have like a cannabis,
I think
bar or
there are
something.
some
I
of
don't know.
those. Yeah,
Are
in
there?
some states. Yeah.
Really? Oh,
Yeah, I
well,
think
there you
there's like
go. I
consumption
should have
lounges.
gotten trademark on that.
You should have. You thought of it first. I know you did. Um, yeah, I would think so that probably starts to become more and more common. Maybe in like 25 years from now, it does. But and still a lot of parts of the country, it's called like devil's lettuce and stuff
Yeah.
like that, where
Like
it's
down.
kind of the
Yeah.
opposite. Yeah, and there's like a whole social history around why that is, and it's just kind of an interesting space, and in my opinion, like a very misunderstood plant.
Yeah. I actually, this is so random, but I did hear for the first time ever about some of the history of that, or at least like a theory of the history of that. On a
Yeah.
podcast, talking about how it goes really back to like, early racism, I think from like hundreds of
Yes.
years ago. And
Yes.
like, I think this might be a oversimplification, but like in those days, like the white people enjoyed alcohol and tobacco and the black people enjoyed cannabis. And so
Yeah.
cannabis was illegal and alcohol and tobacco, ran free.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I think, like really interesting social reads around this. And the whole industry is like, I mean, part of the reason why I joined this company is like, this helps solve a lot of our social equity problems that we have right now. Like when we look at
Mm.
our jailing system in the US, it is packed with people of color who have been convicted on marijuana convictions. And think of the three strike
Crazy.
rule as an example. People are in jail for life right now because they bought or they sold $20 worth of weed. And that's a shame. They
Crazy.
no previous, like, and it's really heartbreaking. So I'd like to think like a lot of the work that we're doing here is helping not just like normalize it, but we also do so much social work internally and on the Cannabis Federation board, and a lot of political work in our company too, to help try to right the wrongs of the past and help with decriminalization and help with, kind of getting people out of jails for previous marijuana convictions. So it's a lot of like, I think, really important social equity work that we're doing as well here.
Yeah. I have to imagine that's, all of the other CROs in, tech or in SaaS, there's the normal CRO problems you have. And then you have like this bucket of kind of other problems, but other opportunity that like, if you break through all of that stuff and the stigma and the education,
Yeah.
and it like could be just a huge, it's just like you said, riding a whole wave of a brand new industry to the country and to
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah, it is. So I call it the rocket ship roller coaster because it certainly feels like that. There's kind of wins and losses every day that make it feel very much like a roller coaster. But overall, when you look at the industry, like I think it was like in 2019, the industry it was something like 10 billion total in sales. And then 2020, it was like 20 billion. And it's
Wow.
projected by 2025 to be at 68. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we look back 15, 25 years from now and see if it eclipses alcohol sales, because the applications are so different and so medicinal as well, that
Yeah.
there's a lot of like very like medicinal applications that could, stamp out some pharmaceutical use, et cetera. So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll let you out of here in a minute. I've got to bring you really quickly into what I call the selfish section, where I just ask a
Okay.
question that's specific for me in my sales career, and no one else has to listen to it. So you mentioned a few times one of the reasons you loved sales was negotiation.
Yeah.
We've got Q2 ending here in about a month. We've got deals on the board.
Yeah.
We're working them. Like, what's your number one tip or philosophy that you have around negotiation?
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, what you're describing right now is a push, you're pushing up on a timeline. You're not really like worried about money. You're kind of like, this is like, we already got Q2. We got to get these deals in Q2. Is that the type of, or are we talking like money negotiation? Which one are you talking about?
I mean, there's both out there. I would say, let's talk money.
Let's talk money.
Yeah.
Oh, then it just comes down to the value built with the product.
Okay, then let's talk timeline.
It comes down to listening too. It's all about
Yeah.
listening. Tom, you're doing
Yeah.
a great job listening to me, kind of talk nonstop today. So I think you'll be fine. This is like, honestly, it's about just human connection. Like if we were going through this with our sales team earlier this week, is how do you help paint a bigger picture for the customer and understand that both us and the customer are driving at the same shared goal right now, right? It's comes back to the mission. I hate to say it, when tie it full circle. And we're helping like provide safe access to everyone. Our mission is aligned with their mission, with our buyer's mission. And if you can align what you're doing with what they are doing, it's about like the value is there. So I would say like take a lot of time and be very human in the sales process. Ask a lot of very curious questions. And the earlier and like more that you understand their perspective and their values early in the process, the easier that the back half of the process is going to go. It's when you feel that kind of that tight pressure on timeline and money, and I got to hit my quota, that things start going sideways in sales. So you kind of prevent that by spending more time up front listening.
Yep. All right, I've got one or two last questions for you. What sales tech do you use? Do you love, or I guess it could be any tech like that you use in your job though, that it could be common like a Salesforce, or it could be like anything that's like new coming up, anything that you use. Yeah, I don't know. Anything like that.
Let's see. So we use kind of your traditional stack of Salesforce, Outreach, like the 1-2 punch for most of our SDRs and AEs. Oh my gosh, I just signed a contract for Dialpad this morning, which I'm kind of excited about. Switching over our phone lines, getting some nice alignment cross departmentally. And so that should be kind of fun because it has some interesting like feature listening technology. We do not use Gong, so sorry, Tom, but
that's okay.
Your team has been.
You're not my account.
Been talking to me, so always in consideration. But let's see, and then we've kind of been experimenting around a little bit with. We just switched over our chat. I think chat is such a great way to do like sales and account-based marketing. It's just a really interesting like way to converse with a lot of buyers who maybe don't want to talk over the phones, which I think a lot of buyers are that way. And we just switched over our chat technology to Incent, a company called Incent.io. And the features have been really interesting. So that's been really fun to get into. We switched from Drift before. So, kind of always experimenting around, keeping my ear to the ground on certain things. Yeah.
Awesome. I know we're wrapping up here. Last thing, any like last words, anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to share? And then obviously if people have questions or want to connect with you, what's a good place for people to reach out or try to connect?
Yeah. No, just a big thank you, Tom, for having me on here today. It's been fun to chat and kind of dump some of my philosophies on you. So I appreciate that. And then if anyone wants to get in touch, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn and send me a message. Or Stephanie@flowhub.com is my email currently. So hit me up.
Awesome. Last piece. I know Mark gave you a shout out on the podcast. Who's a sales leader that should come on this podcast?
If you have not talked to Christina Brady, she's the president of Sales Assembly. She's so solid, such an interesting gal to chat with, and such a strong leader. So I'd give her a really big shout out there.
I'm in.
Yeah, that's it. Go talk.
Awesome.
Go chat with her.
As a New England Patriots fan, I already love her because of her last name. I appreciate you coming on, Stephanie.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
All right. Thank you everyone so much for checking out that podcast, especially if you're in the middle of cleaning the dishes, mowing the lawn, taking a nap, whatever it is that you're doing, multitasking while you're listening to this. I appreciate you. Again, shout out to Gong, shout out to Postal. It's the last month of the quarter. Let's get after it, people. And please hit me up on social media. I'm Tommy Tahoe everywhere. Tom Alemo on LinkedIn, and review this podcast, subscribe, show some love. Peace.